Welcome back. I've got Sean Griffith on the line. Sean, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing wonderful. Thanks so much for having me here today, Michael.
Really looking forward to this conversation. We talked a little bit in the pre-show about some things, and I kind of gave a horror story, which I will reshare during the conversation. Why don't you share a little bit about you, your company, and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually on the east coast of Canada, the city of Moncton, New Brunswick. I grew up here, but I've done a lot of traveling, lived sort of around the world, a number of different places. And but it's where I call home, not too far from the ocean. Get some nice, I like to run, and so I'm outside a lot, and it gives me lots of opportunities to do that. I currently run a company called Truffle. And what we do is sort of AI-powered one-way interviews, right? Both audio and video. Our goal is to sort of, bring some sanity back to the hiring process, especially into that sort of, screening phase of hiring, which we have seen, sort of absolutely explode in the amount of time that takes in the last year or two, right? Had this personal pain myself as I was hiring, folks in my sort of prior career, and so decided to do something about it. I've been an entrepreneur sort of my whole life. I grew up, parents were entrepreneurs, and so, I spent some time, in a couple of different sort of corporate worlds, but I had this, sort of yearning to get back to this, build it myself mentality. So that's sort of where we are today.
It's important work. And the story I shared during the pre-show was, back when I was running multi-site healthcare clinics, the last hire that I did before I left that industry was for a medical receptionist, and we had received 1,200 applicants for the role. And needless to say, that took a while to go through that. And you always have this combination of you want to be fair and give everybody an equal opportunity and look at everybody's resumes as much as you could, but then and also toss in the fear of missing out. What if we miss the best person
Yeah.
we could ever hire in the history of humanity, kind of thing? And it gets overwhelming, and that's just one role. I know many organizations, and I've talked to people all the time. So again, we put a posting out there for a VP of operations, and we had 5,000 applicants. And like, okay, how do you sort through that?
What do you possibly do about it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it literally it's you go to basically like what you do when you're trying to figure out it for a group lunch. You put all the names of the restaurants in a hat and you pick it out. It's like, okay, we are going to Fridays. Okay, great. But everybody goes, oh, I don't like Fridays, and but that's another story for another day.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the same thing. It's like, okay, we're gonna pick the resumes with the person that has the last name J, and okay, and that's not fair to anybody that they didn't choose their last name.
Yeah.
Maybe they did if they got married. They chose the person that had the last name. But again, it's been problematic. So anything that we can do and leveraging AI, like your team is doing, goes a long way. And that initial, and I think that's the big thing when people have interviews, it's they're looking for a fit. The
Yeah.
skills are there, okay.
That's right.
And if skills aren't there, they can be trained. And one of the receptionists I hired had zero medical reception experience, and the doctors thought I was nuts. And then years later, she left to go run a clinic, and they were mad at me to let her go. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't win with these guys.
Yeah.
But it's because I knew she had this,
That's right.
the human skills to be able to navigate with patient and interactions and working with doctors and clinicians
Yeah.
and all of that. I knew she could handle that.
Yeah.
And the skills on the medical side of things, she picked up quickly. So
Yeah.
it's just, knowing, knowing people, but you can't know people in an interview if you've got 5,000 applicants.
Yeah.
That's all you're going to spend your time on is just going through resumes. And most organizations do not have the time or the effort or the desire, quite frankly, to do it. So that's why they're
Yeah.
always looking for different ways to kind of hone down the list till you get to those top ones. And your platform does an amazing job helping them do that. So why don't you share a little bit more about it and what it does without, giving away the Colonel's secret recipe?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. No, great. So, I have so many, so, something that you said there just sort of really resonated, right? Was this idea of, when you've got that, how do you tell if somebody is good, right? And, a big part of that, of course, is the skills. But like you said, a lot of that can be taught. And I can tell you, I've got so many stories from hires that I've made in the past, right? Where the best hires I've made is hiring for trajectory, right? Or culture, which to me, right, in hiring is literally the most important thing that any business can do, right? But oftentimes it's under-resourced or they don't have the right tools, right? And a lot of the tools that do exist out there today, different ATSs, right, applicant tracking systems, I mean, they can't filter well, right? And so then you do end up with 5,000 resumes, and how do you possibly get that down to, the top 10 people that you really want to spend time on? And so was sort of the problem that we started with, right? Myself and my team. I've hired, probably 1,000 people in the course of my career, right? And I got to this point in my last role where we were making a couple of critical hires, but I was getting the same sort of thing. I was getting 2,000 applicants for a job, right? And you're looking for that diamond in the rough at this point. So how do you possibly get there? And that, I guess, was really the sort of birth of Truffle, right? Is is there a way that, using technology today, we can filter out a lot of the noise, right, and give people good data to help support a hiring decision? And that's our ultimate goal, right? Is we don't want to make hiring decisions, but we want to sort of surface to you something that's manageable. Think about like hiring with a brain today, right? And so what Truffle does is it does asynchronous interviews, right? So this is, either an audio or a video interview. It's structured, so every candidate's going to do the same thing. We pull from a bank of questions, right? Or, our customers can create their own custom questions. And then we use sort of a customized intake process, which is virtual, right? It's super simple. We have a SaaS application, so it's very self-serve, which was something that was, really important to us. We worked with many, many, many small businesses in the past, and they don't have access to these sort of tools because they tend to be very expensive. And so we said, hey, is there a way that we can do this, but we can bring it to the founder or the sort of single owner out there, right? And give them the same sort of power, to hire really well that an enterprise might have. And so using this intake in the job description, we generate a custom match, right, based on the candidate's answers. And then we rank the candidates. So that way, you can dive in on as many as you want, but the goal is you should probably spend your time in that top, 10 or top 10%. And that then you've got a lot more data, right? Visibility to say, great, now I want to dive deeper on these ones. So we've taken out hours, or in some cases, days, weeks worth of time from a recruiter, and they can then dive in with those candidates, right? To help them make a much better decision, right? Which is, we know, going to be a much better fit for their organization.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And quite frankly, it lets you, and again, with the ability to structure the questions and things like that, you can get better answers out of it. And you know this, and I am just as guilty of it as a lot of people are. If you're interviewing a pool of candidates, unless you are literally sticking to the script, you might ask questions a little bit differently
Yeah.
to a certain person. Whether, maybe there's a personality conflict that you're sensing, or on the opposite, maybe, there's something that you're like, wow, I really like this person. So human biases can kick in, where in this type of situation, the playing field's been leveled, so everyone has a fair opportunity. Their own personalities can come out, you can watch it, and then of course you can say, oh wow, I really like how she answered that question, or how they were able to articulate that.
Yeah.
The example they gave actually mimics something that you experienced, for example, in a previous organization, and you're thinking, you know what, that would work out really well here. So it gives you that opportunity, and
Yeah.
I think that's what speaks volumes about the platform and everything that it does. So in launching this business, and you kind of alluded to it a moment ago, this came about, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because of the pain point of hiring, and you're like, oh, I can't stand this, and you know what, let's do something about it. So a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of people will just complain and moan, and then continue
Yeah.
using whatever ATS system or whatever they happen to be doing to hire people. But as we kind of jokingly said at the very beginning of our conversation today, not in the pre-show, action takers. You decided, all right,
That's right.
we need to do something about this. What can we do about this? And you dived in, and it ties into what we talked about a bit too. Because you've had other business ventures and leadership opportunities in the past and all of that. Your tool belt is filled with all kinds of different things that you can leverage when obviously when you're building out this organization. So walk us through again, without giving away trade secrets or anything like that, the exercise of, all right, let's build Truffle for this, and
Yep.
what tools do we have available now? And as I know and when you started building this out to the tools that are available today, especially in the AI space,
Yeah.
if you wait a minute, something else is going to come out that might be better. And again, that's where that fear of missing out can bite you in the
Yep.
backside. So you got to be careful. You got to like, no, this is my dance partner. I'm going to work with this. If we find out later on this works better, then we can segue. But if we just constantly switch tools, we're not going to get anything built. So walk us through
Yeah.
those early days, and then we can segue into kind of your leadership background, things that you've seen and experiences that you've had in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. So, when we think about sort of the birth of Truffle, right, and how we got our start, right? We started with this challenge of one of the previous businesses that I was a part of, very early employee, right, and helped to grow, and then we actually exited that business, right. We grew from when I joined $1 million to $40 million, from 7 people to 150 people, right. So we had a great experience there. And I say part of that organization through the acquisition, which we can talk a little bit more about. But one of the things that, really made that organization successful was the people and the hires, right? And we said, okay, if we were to do this over again, how would we hire those people? Do we have the tools available to us today to hire them? And we didn't. So that was sort of the genesis, right? Is how do we find those same sort of hires over again? Those people who punch above their weight, right? Who were just ultimately aligned with our vision and our values, right? And we knew what a poor hire looked like as well, right? And so how do we avoid some of those mistakes in the future? And that's sort of where it started, right? And then so we started to think about, okay, what would a solution look like? And we bounced around a fair amount, right? I don't know, maybe this will be part of Truffle in the future, but I don't know whether you've seen Gong, right? The sales tool, right? We said, well, is there a Gong for HR, right? That would sit over an interview and sort of, give you some AI suggestions. We said, well, that's interesting, but maybe that's not the one, right? We sort of played with that a little bit, and we ultimately landed on what Truffle is today. And it's actually taken, several iterations since, but we really went back to sort of that lean startup methodology, right? And we started there, and we built a lean canvas in the beginning, and we started to sort of test those and speak with, some customers before we even had a product. And really funny story, one of our very first customers who used an insanely basic version of Truffle, right? Which at the time actually didn't have any AI sort of scoring built in. Um, they emailed us back yesterday and they said, hey, we want to come back. We use Truffle again, right? And so I'm really excited to see what they think about it now, right? Where it's taken, massive leaps forward. So that's where we started. We went back to the lean methodology and we said, okay, how do we solve this problem? What does that look like? Who are we solving it for? And this is where we really dialed into our areas of expertise, which was working with small businesses and founders. And, is there a market there that is being underserved today, which we really believe, there's not a great solution, right? And then how do we partner that with AI, right? And the sort of advancements that are coming there. And we've worked pretty rapidly, leveraging a lot of AI ourselves, right? We don't have a designer on staff, for instance. We leverage Claude and ChatGPT and some of the other LLMs to help us in that direction. And I think we've done something that's pretty amazing, given that it's somebody that we don't have on staff. And so we've and then we are wholly focused in working side by side with our customers, right, to help drive the future development. And that is something that I've certainly part of my toolbox, right? And I'm a big, big believer in that, and that's for product-led growth motion and staying very close to our customers and taking our future cues from them. And that has been absolutely instrumental in getting us to where we are today, right? Is really partnering with those customers as we build.
So basically, you're using Gemba. or a lean technology. You're going where the work is, and
That's right.
you're spending time with the clients and actually sitting with them and learning their workflows, not.
Yeah.
And again, it's an opportunity because you can say, we've seen other organizations do it this way, which helps them because unfortunately many organizations operate in silos and they don't
Yeah.
know what their competition or their colleagues in the industry might be doing something that could make things easier because we don't communicate with other organizations as much as we should, even the competition, because, well, they could take our share. It's like, no, if you guys are really good, you're going to expand market share for both of you. You're all going to win. But that's not necessarily the competitive mentality in a lot of
Yeah.
industries. The smart ones do. Your organization obviously is one of them. So you like, let's see what this is.
Yeah.
It's strengthening the product, and congratulations on getting that original client back. Yeah, they're going to be blown away by the difference of it. It's like, okay, you're going from, to date myself here, a DOS-based computer, and now you're using the latest technology and
Yeah.
browsers and tabs, and they're going to be like, what?
Yeah. Hopefully we're gonna blow them away here, right? That's the goal.
I sense you will, especially, well, they're already sold on you. I mean, you could say, well, we still got those old packages. We'll just give them that one. They're happy enough with that, but no,
Yeah.
blow them out the door to make sure that they never consider leaving again. We all make mistakes. I get it, but
Yeah.
no, and again, you guys grew as a business, and they realized, wow,
Yeah.
the grass isn't always greener. Well, it is greener because it's over a septic tank sometimes. So you got to watch out for that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's, and before we go, I want to talk about, scaling businesses and then of course you said you've been part of exits and all of that stuff. I've had a lot of people on the show that have gone through that exercise, sometimes more than once. It's
Yeah.
kind of like uh, what's the analogy I want to use here? A lot of times it's like school in a way. It's like, okay, well, I've graduated from this grade. Okay, now I'm doing the next grade, but very similar exercise. You go through, do the assignments, pass the exam, you get the grade, yay, and then you go. And it's kind of similar in that where you build an organization, you build it, you get it to the point where there's interest in it, or you just like, I want to do something different, and then you
Yeah.
exit away. So what's some of the tips you could give, a small entrepreneur that's built something that it's doing well, but they want to grow it with the ultimate goal to sell it. What are some tips that may not be as commonly known
Yeah.
as you can find out there that worked for you to help you, especially, scaling from a small organization to thousands of employees,
Yeah.
that's not easily done, and a small percentage of businesses get to do that. So there's something in that sauce that was working well. But
Yeah.
so what's some of the tips you could share with the audience on that?
Yeah, I would say there's sort of two probably key things I would say that really contributed to scaling and growth, right? One was when we were about 50 people, we got to the point where I think that's somewhere between 30 and 50 people, things really start to change, right? You become less connected to everybody, right? Up until that point, I was personally interviewing everyone we hired, right? And I think I did for quite a while longer. And at the very least, I had an intro call with everyone up until we were about 200 people, right? But then it changes again, right? But at that about 50 person, right, your processes start to evolve in a different way, right? Some of the things that you did before just aren't going to work. They're not going to scale, right? We had a couple thousand customers at that point, and so customer support was very different, but we still didn't have great, internal knowledge base, right? And so, that needed to happen. And we had a phenomenal leadership team, but staying aligned became more and more challenging, right? As there was just more people and they were working, right? And so, it's how did we unlock that was really key to our growth. And we turned to a tool, right? So we used EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, and we had a coach come into the business and work with us, right? And so I sort of led that initiative and actually brought that to some of the businesses that we were acquired by over time. But that was a really key unlock for us, right? Is we have the structured L10 weekly leadership meeting, right, which we run today at Truffle as well, right? And it allowed us to speak the same language, right, as a leadership team. as well as the rest of the organization, right? And we really, at that point, solidified our values as well, right? We had these sort of implicit values previously, but getting those out on paper, digital paper, right? So I don't know whether we actually ever printed them because we were a remote organization, but and then making sure that we sat with those for a little while, right? Amazingly, in a 1 day session, we aligned on them as a team. But then there was some nuance to it, right, which we took a little bit of time. And then we brought them out to the organization and we said, hey, we want you to be a part of the sort of finalization of these, right? This is the leadership vision, but we want you to have a part in this. And I think between bringing the EOS to the team, right, these weekly meetings, right, and the goal was not more meetings, it was less meetings, it was but let's make the most impactful. And there's a whole structure around EOS as well. And then the values I think were really, really important. And then, not to sound cliche here, right? But hiring, right? It is the most important thing you can do. And we over-index on our hiring, sometimes maybe to our detriment, right? But we spent a lot of time, right? And we used the WHO methodology for hiring, right? Which was phenomenal, right? It was sort of very deep dives on individuals, right? And then really sort of matching their own personal ratings of themselves, right? And then speaking with prior managers or colleagues, right? And so we spent a lot of time in that process. But I think that's one of the things that helped lead us to finding the best possible people out there, right? By having this sort of structured process. And that was something that we bring to Truffle today, right? Is a lot of those sort of similar questions which we developed during that period of time, right? You'll find in the Truffle templates today, and how those are, the data science that we've brought to score those questions and match the things, right? Based off of much of this hiring that we did over that period of time. So I would say, you know, find some sort of operating model if you're starting to scale, right? There are many different ones out there, OKRs, EOS, right? Those sort of things. It doesn't have to be full-fledged, but get something in place. Not too heavy, right? Make it as light as you can, and then figure out some sort of methodology for hiring and tweak it based on the role, right? Some you may need less of it, right? Some you may need more of it, right? This is where using Truffle for a section of it, right? But then having your own process afterwards could be really, really helpful.
Yeah, and it's all about systems. It's a little and adapting accordingly, and knowing the DNA of your organization, and what you want the organization to be, how you want it to serve the people that you work with and
Yeah.
work for, and and talk about that. And in those meetings, just okay, yeah, you have the agenda, you've got the bullet points to go through and all of that. It's important. Checklists are really, really good. I'm a big fan of
Yeah.
checklists. Otherwise, I'll be like, what am I doing today?
Yeah.
But what am I doing now? Yeah, but but it's important, and it's what happens is when you create this environment like you have, it allows it to scale. And the reason why is because you've been methodical in putting in the ingredients in the right order,
Yeah.
and adjusting as you need to, and understanding that it's a marathon and not a sprint. But sometimes you run into situations where an organization like yours, I would not shock me in the least bit if someone reaches out to you at some point and goes, "Yeah, we need that as part of our system." One of the big boys, and
Yep.
they go, "Here's a bag full of loonies and toonies. Let's go." And
Yep.
you're going to be like, it's going to cost more than a bag. we
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
we need the Brinks truck
Yeah.
backed
Bring
up
bring the
with
truck. Yeah.
bags and bags of those. And preferably, could you go with the coins? They're kind of heavy. Bills are
Yeah.
much lighter. Or use Interact. We'll figure
That's
something
right.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it all works out. So, Sean, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So hiretruffle.com will take you there, right? Lots of information there on how Truffle works, right? As well as a trial to get signed up for.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So again, Sean, thank you so much for this and all the work you're doing and sharing all the knowledge you shared today.
Yeah, really great chatting with you.